Good evening. Welcome to the District of Sechelt regular meeting of Council of Wednesday, July 20th. And I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the territory of the Sechelt Nation. We have an amended agenda this evening. Report 8.1, which is the zoning bylaw, has an updated zoning map that's on the agenda today. Other than that, any other additions or deletions to the agenda? Thank you. Any declarations of conflict? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I declare a conflict for items 8.2 and 10.4. My partner served as a consultant on both of those projects.
Thank you. So 8.2 and 10.4. Thank you. Any others? Seeing none, I'd look for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Then I'd look for a motion to receive all the staff reports. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. First up is item number 5, adoption of minutes of the previous council meeting. This is minutes of the 7 p.m. regular council meeting of July 6th, and these are before us for adoption. Any errors or omissions in these minutes? Councillor Toth.
Just a quick one that I've already passed on to staff. In 11.2 on page 11, it should say that public commenting will remain open on emergency preparedness posts. It's all about Facebook. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense otherwise. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other errors or omissions? If not, I'll look for a motion to adopt as amended. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item, business arising from the minutes. Any business arising from these minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 7, receipt of committee minutes. This is the Advisory Planning Commission minutes of July 5th, 2022, and these are for receipt. These are pages 13 through 16. Any error? Well, there's no errors or omissions in this. These aren't our minutes. I'd look for a motion to receive. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 8.1. This is the zoning bylaw 580 for second reading, and I'll look to our planning staff, and I believe Director Allen is going to lead this off. Thank you.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Mayor Seegers, and thank you for accommodating me virtually this evening. It's nice to be here. I will, in a moment, pass this off to Mr. Hogg, who will run through referral responses, and Mr. Hall, of course, is in council chambers as well, and the three of us will be available afterwards. So tonight's process here is to report back on the referral process that we have conducted in the last couple of months. It is a key milestone tonight. We'll be recommending second reading and moving towards a public hearing in September. So there is a decision point tonight, which is different from 2 weeks ago, but this is, of course, not consideration of final adoption. So I'll just do a brief flyover. From a referral standpoint, there's one statutory referral, which is to the Ministry of Transportation. The Ministry of Transportation has to approve any zoning bylaw or zoning bylaw change that impacts properties within 800 meters of the controlled access highway. And so the ministry has given us provisional approval already, and we'll continue to report back to them. We really enhanced our efforts in our referral to them. We created a series of maps highlighting the intersections throughout Sechelt, creating a circle highlighting the 800-meter radius, highlighting what changes may have taken place in those areas, and they were quite pleased with that and have given us preliminary approval. That said, of course, we wouldn't just simply conduct one referral. We've sent referrals to a variety of provincial ministries, Agricultural Land Commission, Ministry of Food and Agriculture, Vancouver Coastal Health, locally, District Chamber of Commerce, Sechelt Downtown Business Association, SCREDO, the Sunshine Coast Economic Development Organization, Housing Action Table. We've had a number of meetings, Zoom meetings, in-person meetings to work through. We've categorized the comments, we've categorized and outlined the amendments that we have made from the first draft, which Council reviewed in April, as to second reading draft, which is on this evening's agenda. So we really feel we've come a long way, really made a lot of changes, a lot of good, positive, impactful changes to the bylaw, made it a little bit more visually appealing, and are pleased to present it this evening for consideration of second reading. And I'll pass it over to Sam now, who will go through a brief presentation to highlight some of those referral comments that we've received. Thank you.
My video froze for a second, so I'll make sure everyone can hear me. I'll take that. I hope that's a yes.
All right, we can see the zoning bylaw.
Great, thank you. Sorry, 1 second. There
you go. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, so as Andrew mentioned, my name is Sam Hogg. I'm the senior policy planner with the district. I was hoping to be in person tonight, but my partner tested positive for COVID, so I'm kind of stuck at home for a few days at least. As Andrew mentioned, we're moving through the bylaw referral process. So we're replacing zoning bylaw 25 with zoning bylaw 580. And this presentation, this very brief presentation, will give an overview of the comments we've received during the referral period. Now that we're moving towards second reading, and I'll leave some time for questions, and my two colleagues are also here to help answer.
Mr. Hogg, I'm going to interrupt for a second. We're going to have you slow down a little bit. It seems there's a little bit of a lag with your audio, and so it's a little muffled on this end.
Sorry.
Yeah, maybe get a little switch to your microphone, maybe.
Oh, I'm using headphones. I can always switch as well.
Okay, let's try that.
1 sec, sorry.
Is that better? Sorry.
You'll have to start talking and see if it makes a difference.
Sorry, can you hear me?
You seem to be freezing a bit too.
Oh, there is a lag. Maybe I'll try and leave and come back. Sorry.
Okay.
Is that better?
That sound seems a little better. We don't have your presentation now, though.
He's not connected to the meeting at the moment.
I think we might have you.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I turned my video off. I think that might have improved things.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thanks. Sorry. There we go. This is a classic Zoom experience. Okay, I'll move along if you can just making sure this is still working. Just looking at a timeline of where we are in the process. So as I mentioned, we were we're now past the first reading, and the referral period ended on July 4th. And we previously went to council on July 6th with the engagement summary. And then public hearing and adoption and consideration for adoption are looking to be in the fall, with the public hearing scheduled on September 8th, which is the first Thursday of the month. I'll walk through the comments we've received from the referral organizations. And just as a note, we're still waiting on the review from the Shoalway Nation, and the review is expected before the end of the month. Referral comments were received over the course of 60 days in a combination of virtual meetings and through written comments. Community associations were included as referral organizations and were sent the same package as the other organizations. Starting off now with Scredo and with the Affordable Housing Society, they both shared similar comments. Both organizations supported the bylaw, recognizing it as a stepping stone towards as a foundational document. Both organizations both mentioned the overlapping where that we're currently measuring, so units per hectare. And they both note that the district should proceed with the measurement that allows the higher density. They both were not in support of any loss in density or any downzoning across the district. And both organizations were supportive of a density bonus in for rental, but given sufficient community involvement. Moving on to the business community, district staff met with the SDBA and the Chamber of Commerce. We met with them concurrently, and they provided both written and verbal comments. The SDBA and the Chamber of Commerce both agree with moving away from units per hectare as a measurement, and they note that it encourages the development of larger luxury units. They both don't support the loss in height being seen in many residential zones, and they suggest increasing height and density in most residential zones to allow less restrictive housing types. They give specific examples, so saying they suggest in the R3 and the R4 moving towards 50% site coverage and 0.7 FAR, and they suggest in the RM1 moving towards 1.4 FAR, so floor area ratio, and that's a change that was ultimately made. The two organizations also suggest rewriting the I1 and the I2 industrial zones in order to create more opportunities for businesses to relocate to the coast, and this would include some kind of height increase. Moving on to health and BCH. So BCH was supportive of the prioritization of development away from rural areas and towards more easily serviced areas within the UCB, the urban containment boundary. BCH was supportive of the shift towards mixed-use development, and they note that the district should plan to avoid conflicts in new mixed-use development. So, for example, avoiding noisy restaurants underneath residential buildings. They also suggest looking at ways to create climate resiliency, improve active transportation, and increase tree cover for heat tolerance. Moving on to agriculture. So the Ministry of Agriculture and Food and the ALC both provided written comments. The Ministry of Ag was supportive of the new AG1 zone. They gave suggestions on wording to better align the AG1 zone with provincial regulations, and these have been implemented in the bylaw. Suggested improving the buffer surrounding ALR land, and we've reached out to the ministry for example wording on this type of buffer or this type of boundary. The ministry also noted that the district's regulations surrounding cannabis production were overly restrictive, and they suggested increasing the lot coverage and decreasing the setback required for cannabis facilities. This point was also echoed by the ALC, and in response, we've reduced the setback for cannabis production in the AG1 from 100 meters to 50 meters. And the ministry also supported or suggested requiring all backyard animals to be registered with the provincial premises ID program. Looking now at education, so district staff met with the school district. We fielded questions directly in a virtual meeting, and they had lots of specific questions relating to the rezoning of school district-owned land, and their other concerns would fit better within an OCP update or a master transportation plan. Looking now at the community associations, so district staff sent referral notices to each of the 7 community associations and met with the representatives from the associations on June 16th. The Sandy Hook Community Association also submitted an extensive list of comments Staff responded with an FAQ document, which was published to the Have Your Say page. Their submission included grammatical and structural suggestions, and many of which were incorporated into the second reading draft. Many of the concerns, or one of the major concerns that was brought up by the community associations, was the loss of the second primary dwelling, which was discussed in the July 6th council report. And as we noted in that meeting, staff are suggesting increasing the size of the detached accessory dwelling to support homeowners that have planned on building a second dwelling on their lot. District staff also worked with the East Porpoise Bay Community Association, and we regarding the mixed-use M1 zone, and live work units and tourist accommodation were both added as uses in the M1 zone, following feedback from the East Porpoise Bay Community Association. So looking at next steps for the bylaw renewal process. So as I noted before, we'll be hearing back from the Shoalway Nation, hopefully before the end of the month. And yeah, as I mentioned, we're looking at public hearing on September 8th and consideration of adoption later in the fall. And I'll now move on to any questions you might have, and my two colleagues are also here, can help answer them as well. So thanks so much. Hopefully you heard at least part of that.
Thank you. Okay, Council, any questions or comments? Councillor Todd.
Thank you. On pages 36 through 40, there's a series of maps there that have some annotations that have been made. Who provided the feedback that came with those maps? With everybody else, it was sort of clear, clearly stated on the page who was providing feedback.
I can answer that. I believe that was from the Chamber of BA. If we're talking about the same, I can pull it up, but I believe that's who provided those. It was kind of side by side with like text and boxes. That was from the SDBA and Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah. Mr. Allen?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to confirm, as Mr. Hogg was losing audio, that resulted from initial review from Scredo, SDBA, and the District Chamber of Commerce, and we received that an annotated map in advance of our meeting with them and had an opportunity to discuss a number of those issues and accommodate where possible.
Thank you. Councillor Todd?
Sorry, I'm good. Just forgot to take my hand down.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Questions? Councillor McLean?
Yeah, I've got a couple, but maybe I'll start with one which Mr. Hogg did mention, but I don't quite see reflected. There was a suggestion to delete the units per hectare because it encourages larger luxury units. So I'm still seeing references in there, so I'm just wondering if we could speak to why it's good practice to have them included.
Sure, I can speak to that. I think for now we will be sticking with both the UPH and the FAR as measurements. But in the future, I know we've decided we've realized that an OCP update would be required to eliminate the UPH. So as for now, just considering that this is just a stepping stone, or this is a foundational document, it does make sense to include both. And then moving forward, we would look to have some more analysis to find the right floor area ratio numbers that could replace that duplicate system.
Yeah, I think Mr. Hall has some additional comments.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Sam was saying, it's basically the OCP still includes both units per hectare and FAR. So we wanted to keep both in the zoning bylaw version now, and then it's certainly a line we've been hearing from a number of different agencies and organizations about, and you can see in a lot of newer zoning bylaws moving away from units per hectare to solely floor area ratio. So that's something as part of future OCP updates, we can address that in the OCP, and then that can lead to subsequent changes in the zoning bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor McLean, did you have anything else?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in if no one else is eager to get in there. Let's go So one of the comments was about increasing the height in the I1 and I2 zones. Was consideration put into this, and yeah, what considerations should we have for that?
Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Mayor. I think with the I1 and 2 zones, primary focus was really cleaning up the existing industrial zoning in Bylaw 25. There's a large number of industrial zones, and they all kind of mixed light and heavy industrial uses together. And the focus was really around clearly distinguishing between light industrial and heavy industrial, while not radically changing height or setbacks or other things in the zoning bylaw. It's certainly something we can look into in future, but I think at this time, increasing the height from 10.5 meters to 20 meters is quite a substantial change to make across the board. We'd have to do some more analysis on that sort of business park model that's been suggested and some of those newer developments that we can see around the Lower Mainland, et cetera. But I think that's going to take a little bit more work to see what the impacts would be and how to manage the different industrial uses and the opportunities there, and balancing obviously the uses in industrial zones versus the downtown commercial zones, and kind of distinguishing between primary and accessory office and retail and industrial, and kind of figuring those pieces out.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb?
Okay, yeah. Anyways, I'd like to make a motion to change front line setbacks for the I1 industrial zone properties. But first off, I'd like everyone to know that I do own I1 industrial properties, and I'm getting close to starting another project. The change that I'm asking for right now will not affect my project, as our DPs, everything is in place. So yeah, our setbacks are already established. So anyway, so my motion is for the I1 industrial properties to move the front line setback from 9 meters to 5 meters. So it's a change from approximately 30 feet off the front line to 15 feet off the front line. And my rationale behind that is industrial users or tenants usually have journeymen and apprentices, and potential for the local youth here to expand their horizons. Right now, you can still build 75% of the property, but you usually need more parking and storage, which there's usually never enough storage. And one of the big things is land costs and construction costs are so expensive right now that the larger the building you can put on one of these properties, it gives you the potential to lower your rates. And anyways, that's already the industrial rates on a new building are exceeding the commercial rates in the community, and that's usually not the case. Usually industrial rates are substantially less than commercial rates. So yeah, that's my motion to move the front line setbacks from 9 meters to 5 meters, just for the I1 zone.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded, thank you. Any questions or comments on this? The recommendation on the floor. Councillor McLean?
Yeah, to our planning staff, has this been considered in the OCP in some of the discussions there?
Sorry, you indicated it's in the OCP? Is that what you said?
No, I'm just wondering what is in the OCP and what direction it provides for this conversation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Allen?
Sure, thank you. I would say that's a little too granular for the OCP, and when it gets into those type of setbacks, it's really more of a zoning issue the OCP does in fact speak to building height, for example, and when to increase to 6 stories. And it wasn't really pondered for industrial use per the previous discussion. But in this particular case, we came forward with a 9-meter setback to account for loading zones and parking spaces and so forth, under the assumption that those are on the front. Moving the building closer to, say, 5 meters does provide the opportunity to bring parking and access around the back, which might be a little bit more OCP compliant in terms of development permit areas for form and character and so forth. So the staff are comfortable with this amended setback in this resolution, and over to council.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the recommendation on the floor? Councillor McLean?
Yeah, I guess my challenge with this is just looking at the vision of what we're trying to do here. It's bring an update to the OCP or to the zoning bylaw to bring it in line with the OCP. So we are making some small changes here and there, but for the most part, it's just bringing it into a more modern terms and bringing that alignment. I would like to see setbacks changed for a lot of properties, but that's a larger conversation. So trying to keep this within a sense that it is this largely a procedural update, because I think, yeah, the setback could have larger impacts, and I'm not sure what they are at this time. I need to do a finer analysis and doing this on the spot amendment to it right now.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Lamb?
Yeah, just one of the things, like a lot of the properties in the I-1 zones are relatively small, and so when you take a 30-foot section or a 9-meter piece of land off the front, it really inhibits the opportunity for the use of the property. So just once again, my reason for my setback.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right. We have a recommendation on the floor. All those in favor? Any opposed? Would you like that recorded? Thank you. All right. Any other questions on the report in front of us? I'm going to ask one question around page 21. This was talking about the increasing the lot coverage and decreasing the setback required for cannabis facilities. I know when we were putting those in, we were looking at trying to limit where they went, and then the Agricultural Land Commission changed the rules. So now they're coming and saying we're being a little restrictive. Did we do any changes in the zoning bylaw to address their comments?
I can. Sorry, I think we all spoke at once. I'll hop in, then they can probably, my two colleagues probably expand on this. We only made that one change. So the ALC and the ministry both commented on the two parts. So they commented on the site coverage and the setbacks, saying that both were a little bit too restrictive. And the only thing we changed was the setbacks, so moving from 100 meters in the AG1, so 100 meters away from the lot line, and we dropped that down to 50 meters. And they were suggesting 30, so we kind of saw that as a small compromise.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? Councillor Toth?
Thank you. On page 145 of the agenda package, section 2.4, there's a table there about the combined gross floor area of all accessory buildings. I just wanted clarification. Does that table include any detached accessory dwellings? Because I know that we've made the change from 90 square meters to 120 square meters, but this table hasn't changed. So I don't, we're trading a little bit more residential area for a little bit less workshop or storage or studio, what have you, if this is the case. Thank you.
Mr. Hall.
Thank you. Good question. No, the accessory buildings and accessory dwelling units are dealt with and counted separately. So section 2.4 just deals with accessory buildings, not dwellings. The accessory dwelling unit is counted separately, so it doesn't factor into this table here. So somebody could have, assuming they're allowed the 120 square meter accessory dwelling unit detached as proposed, then, and they have additional accessory buildings that are not dwellings, they would be counted separately under this table 2.4.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor McLean?
Yeah, just picking up another comment within a referral. For accessory dwellings in the R3 zone, it has a 4.5 meter height, whereas in the R4 zone, it's a 6.5 meter height. So I'm just wondering if a staff member could speak to why there may be a difference between these two zones and the height of an accessory dwelling unit.
Mr. Hall?
Yeah, in the R3 zone, it doesn't actually allow a detached accessory dwelling unit because it's a much smaller residential lots, but that's the 4.5 meters is the height of the accessory buildings. And then in the R4 zone, like other zones that would allow a detached accessory dwelling unit, the height of the dwelling unit is 6.5 meters, where the accessory building height, actually I think in the current version of the bylaw is now 5 meters for most residential zones.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor McLean?
Yeah, just another one from the business community. The comment about the maximum size of each business as being 175. In your conversation with them, can you expand on that point a little bit? I'm not certain what they were looking for there.
Mr. Hall?
Perhaps through the chair, was that just specifically for the C1 zone, the neighborhood commercial zone?
I believe so, but their comment wasn't clear, so I'm hoping you know what they were talking about.
Yeah,
Can we just get to the page? What page are you looking at, Councillor McLean?
I don't have a page number handy. I believe it's in the drawings.
Yeah, I mean, at least in the bylaw, if we were looking at the C1 zone, the neighborhood commercial zone, I think in the previous first reading version of the bylaw, we had a maximum gross floor area of 100 square meters for any one commercial use. In the second reading version, that has been increased to 500 square meters. So that would certainly provide more flexibility there, but still in keeping with the intent of the neighborhood commercial zone to provide a limited commercial space and not compete with, say, downtown or other commercial areas.
Thank you. Council, any other questions or comments? Councillor Toth?
Thank you. I still have a lot of concern around auxiliary detached dwellings. Just in talking to neighbors and community members, I think, if any of our residential zones have the septic carrying capacity and setbacks can manage it, I think we should be allowed a detached auxiliary dwelling, even if it's just a one-room cottage. But that's not anything I'm going to try and wordsmith tonight or make motions for tonight. But my question is, if we proceed at this point, moving forward, my understanding is that we're unable to change density without triggering an additional public hearing. So if we go forward as it is now, and everybody at the public hearing comes back and says, we want that size requirement for an auxiliary detached dwelling lowered to 1,500 square meters, if we actually did that, we would trigger a second public hearing. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, great question, Councillor Toth. And that would, any changes to use or density would require a second public hearing. Another option is to provide direction for staff to look into that separately as a follow-up amendment to an adopted bylaw. And that might allow a deeper conversation with Vancouver Coastal Health we did pose this question, and it's difficult in the municipal sewage regulations because it is in many respects industry regulated through registered wastewater professionals. But it calls into question that some properties very well will indeed have suitable soil and location for septic field, but not all properties. And so there might be a deeper conversation there to be had. The planning department does support opportunities for dwellings. The 2,000 square meter mark has been used for decades. It's enshrined in Vancouver Coastal Health subdivision guidelines. I know building a second dwelling isn't necessarily subdivision, but it is a conversation that could be had with each neighborhood and community associations about that level of density and its applicability across the board, outside of sewer areas, outside of transit areas, and so forth. Noting, of course, any single dwelling in any zone that allows single dwellings may have a suite. So we do that much, but acknowledging more could be done. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting perspective because you're right. You can have a suite in a dwelling of any size. We don't limit it whatsoever, but if it's not attached to the main building, you can't have one if you're not half an acre or bigger. So like I said, nothing I'm looking to disturb tonight, but be interesting to see what the community has to say as we move forward here.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Councillor McLean?
Maybe this is the time where I read that thing I wrote. I think I'm done with questions. Comment. I just want to highlight that the primary objective that council set for this new zoning bylaw is to bring it in alignment with the official community plan and modernize some of the provisions. So the key thing that the official community plan does is it guides where development shouldn't be directed in the next 5 to 10 years. So much of that vision remains true today. We still need to densify downtown Sechelt and West Sechelt, and perhaps less so in, say, Sandy Hook. But what has changed is that we're now in a housing crisis. But the misalignment and outdatedness of Bylaw 25 has held back progress. When doing policy planning, it's important to start with a strong foundation. Bylaw 580 provides a strong foundation for moving forward. I've heard comments from several people that they believe their property should be in R2 or R3 or this zoning or that zoning. So that's kind of what exactly we're trying to do here, is have that foundation where people can say, this is my vision, and they can base it off of some of the available zones in the zoning bylaw. So instead of having general visions for the community where they don't really align with the different zones, the next OCP can really go back to the zoning bylaw and say, hey, maybe Davis Bay should be R3, or Selma Park should be R2. You can kind of have those conversations. And so this zoning bylaw provides that strong foundation. So like we mentioned earlier on the accessory dwelling units, we can also have targeted conversations to create specific changes once we have adopted the zoning bylaw. It is a strong policy foundation that makes community conversation much easier to move forward. So rather than making some of these changes like Councillor Toss suggested, I agree with the approach that we can tackle it after the zoning bylaws been adopted. I truly believe this is a good foundation that we can build off and really shape the next OCP based on the foundation that is the zoning bylaw. So I'm in full support of moving this forward today.
Thank you. Other councillors, comments, questions? Councillor Toth, you look like you're debating. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying really hard to not get too offended by Councillor McLean's comments, because he's right. It is good policy and it's a good baseline. The housing crisis cannot be swept under the rug. It can't be sort of tinkered at around the edges with the zoning update. It really is a fundamental crisis in our planning, in our everything on the Sunshine Coast right now. I know that the province was talking about possibly removing some zoning control from municipalities in order to get more housing built. What does that look like? We don't know yet if they do decide to move down that road. I said it at the last meeting that I think we missed an opportunity to sort of step past the OCP because it's out of date. And, the vision for the next 5 or 10 years is great if that was a current OCP, but that OCP is already 11 years old. So just my thoughts. I think we could do more, but I'm also not willing to risk grinding it to a halt to try and get more done now. So.
All right, I'm going to make a couple of comments and then we'll see if there's a motion that wants to be put on the floor here. I agree with Councillor McLean. This zoning bylaw is to bring it into alignment with the OCP. So the OCP, the Official Community Plan, is 12 years old now. Typically, official community plans are revised, maximum about 10 years. So it is outdated already. But in the meantime, we've been working with a zoning bylaw that is not in conformity, and in fact, in a lot of places, conflicts with the official community plan. That's caused more work for our staff. That's caused confusion and more work for those who are looking to build in the district. So by actually bringing this zoning bylaw into alignment with the official community plan, it'll set us up for the work that you're talking about, Councillor Toth, Councillor McLean. We can then they've already indicated that once this is passed, what they're going to be looking at then is the official community plan. So we need to do an update to the official community plan to bring in all of those things that the community wants to see that aren't in here yet. And then once those are done, we can actually go back and revise the zoning bylaw. What we've seen on the Sunshine Coast, both here in the town of Gibsons and the regional district, is that the official community plans have been put in place and have been left to age in place. And the other documentation hasn't actually kept up. The idea is to continually revise these as the community changes so that we incorporate them into the official community plan. We see them reflected in our zoning bylaw so that those documents live in the community. They don't just become these things that are on the shelf that are outdated and can't be used anymore. We've had a lot of development zones had to be put in because things did not exist in our zoning bylaw. So we had to actually create separate zones for them. Through this zoning bylaw, staff have actually gone back and looked at all of those and actually created the zones that should have been in place so that we don't have those CD zones. We actually have zones that match what's happening and what's in our OCP. So it's a really good foundational document. Yes, is it perfect? No. Is everybody going to like it? No. There is probably some fine tuning that has to happen. And we know that anytime a zoning bylaw gets passed, within a month or two, there are going to be changes that come forward because as it's in operation, we may see things that weren't quite right up front. Does that mean we hold it back? No. That means we move this forward and we work with those as we go on. So I'm in support of getting this done, and I'd like to say thank you to staff for all the work you've put into this. I know you've had to prioritize this on top of some other work that you've had come before you. Other developments that have come before you. You've put those aside in cases and moved this forward so that we can actually get it to the finish line. This project has been in process for over 10 years, and we've had how many drafts done? This is probably the 4th draft of this, and it's gotten to draft form and never actually gotten over the finish line. And I think what we're trying to see is we get it over the finish line so that we've got the majority of the items addressed and dealt with, and that'll make it easier on everybody, the community, the development community, and our staff. So I want to say thank you for the work you've done. I know it's been, you've come in sometimes on weekends and evenings and put all that time in. So I wanted to say thank you very much for that work. We just had Councillor Rowe join us. Councillor Rowe, did you have any questions or comments around the zoning bylaw? We're on item 8.1.
I've been listening while I'm at work and on my way home. Sorry, my apologies for being late. I agree, it's not a perfect document, but will we ever have a perfect document that everybody's going to like? Probably not. And I don't think that should stop us from moving forward with a really good piece of policy work that's long overdue. So I'm in support of moving this forward, and I look forward to September 8th.
Thank you. Councillor Kuster?
Yeah, I wanted just to say that I actually agree with both Councillor McLean and Councillor Toth. Both have very valid points. I think that we do have to look at what our community is now, but we also have to look into the future, the growth we're experiencing, the homelessness we're experiencing. But this is a starting point, and we need a starting point. And so I'm happy to support this tonight. And as well, I want to thank the planning department and staff for this is a huge undertaking. It's something that we as a council put a priority on right when we were elected. So I'll move recommendation number 2, that council proceed with giving second reading to zoning bylaw 580/2022.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. All right. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Toth.
Just a point of clarification, because of Councillor Lamb's motion earlier, does this need to read as amended? Or do we do that at the bylaw reading itself?
Corporate Officer?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. After council voted on this motion, I was going to put up my hand. It would be in order to give it second reading as amended. Not so much with this recommendation, but when you actually read the bylaw next.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb?
Yeah, so this is second reading, and so now it goes back for public comment, and then it comes back to us again. So there is still potential for public to have input on this.
Oh, yes. Public hearing is where we want to hear from the public. Yeah. Thank you. So you're okay with us moving this motion as presented at this point?
Yes, Your Worship. This is a recommendation that council proceed, so that's okay. But when you actually read it, it would be in order to say second reading as amended.
Thank you. When I actually get to the bylaw. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a recommendation on the floor that council proceed with giving second reading to zoning bylaw number 580/2022. Any other further comments or questions? All those in favor? Thank you. So then we move on to the actual bylaw. Which is on page 65. All right. Is there? So this is District of Sechelt Bylaw number 580/2022, a bylaw to establish zoning bylaw 580/2022 for the District of Sechelt. And I'd look for someone to move second reading as amended. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Question for staff before we move on from this. Were we also looking at requesting public hearing date be set at this time? Mr. Allen?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Seegers. We do propose a public hearing date of September 8th. It's the evening after the regular first council meeting on Wednesday. On occasion, we've had public hearing before council, and that gives us perhaps an hour of time, we think, for a bylaw of this magnitude. It deserves its own night, and so we suggest September 8th. And while it does not require a council resolution, it would be helpful for us to confirm that in advance of conducting our advertisements with Coast Reporter and other means as well.
So you'd look for a recommendation to hold a public hearing on September 8th on bylaw 580?
Yes.
Okay. Would someone like to make that recommendation? Moved? Seconded? All in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to item 8.2, and we're going to move Councillor McLean into the gallery.
Your Worship, Councillor McLean is on hold.
He's on hold. Okay, so we can't actually see what we're doing or hearing. Okay, perfect. So item 8.2A, this is Habeas Nestman Road Sanitary Sewer Local Area Service Establishment, bylaw number 609, 2022. And over to our corporate officer, Ms. Frank.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is before Council for your consideration of giving first, second, and third reading to Habeas Nestman Road Sanitary Sewer Local Area Service Establishment Bylaw, number 609. This has come forward because, as Council may recall, Council considered a staff report and a letter from the owner of property in the Habeas Nestman Roads area who has applied to the district for subdivision approval for 99 lot or thereabout subdivision. The property is not currently in the district sewer specified area, and so therefore cannot be serviced with sanitary sewer. So this bylaw, so Council subsequently directed that staff prepare the necessary bylaw and bring it forward, and that's what this bylaw is. If it were to be adopted by Council, it will create a brand new service area. I note that while this bylaw sets out everything that's required under the community charter to set up a service, it is actually a parcel tax bylaw that will set the tax, the parcel tax that we would collect from the individual properties that were to be eligible for sewer. So that bylaw is not before Council at this point. At this stage, we would like to get Council to give 3 readings to the local area service establishment bylaw, and then the next steps after that is to get a petition signed by the property owner that includes all the elements that the community charter requires that the petition have in it. And then once we receive that, staff would bring this bylaw back for Council's consideration of adoption. And then after that, we would bring a parcel tax bylaw forward in time that would reflect whatever the current costs, final costs are of the service, and that would set the actual tax. And that's my report. If you have any questions, thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Seeing no questions, there is a recommendation on page 178. Councillor Toth.
I do have one quick question, and my apologies if this was answered previously. I'm a little foggy still. Will this developer be required to pay any sewer DCCs relating to capacity at the WRC or anything like that?
I will turn to my colleague, Mr. Hall, to answer that, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, certainly as part of the subdivision application, they would be required to pay development cost charges. And given that there's one parent lot and they're creating, at this time, proposing to create 99 lots or 98 new lots, then they would be required to pay DCCs for the 98 lots.
Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I'm happy to move recommendation 2 that Council proceed with giving first, second, and third reading to Habeas Nestman Roads Sanitary Sewer Local Area Service Establishment Bylaw number 609, 2022.
Seconder for the recommendation. Sorry, I was just thinking it could be a longer name, you know, like it's just, Councillor Kuster seconded that. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. I'll move on to the actual bylaw. This is on page 180, item 8.2B. District of Sechelt bylaw number 609, 2022, a bylaw to establish the Habeas Nestman Road Sanitary Sewer Local Area Service. I look for someone to move first reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. District of Sechelt bylaw number 609, 2022, a bylaw to establish the Habeas Nestman Roads Sanitary Sewer Local Area Service. And someone to move second reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And District of Sechelt bylaw number 609, 2022, a bylaw to establish the Habeas Nestman Roads Sanitary Sewer Local Area Service. And someone to move third reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Thank you. And can we bring Councillor McLean back in, please? Welcome back, Councillor McLean. We are moving on to item 8.3A. This is District of Sechelt Bylaw Notice Enforcement Implementation Amendment Bylaw number 515-8, 2022. And Mr. Appelt, over to you.
Hello. Thank you, Mayor Seegers and Councillor. Okay, so this is my short presentation for this bylaw. Bylaw 515-8 is the final step in passing the new solid waste collection and disposal bylaw number 598-2021 that we passed in late November last year. This proposed bylaw amends the Bylaw Notice Enforcement Implementation Bylaw number 515, commonly referred to as the BENS bylaw. The BENS bylaw is the tool district staff uses to assign bylaw fines. The proposed amendment replaces the current BENS section dealing with solid waste with a new section that coincides with the new solid waste bylaw. Oh boy, it worked. Our new solid waste bylaw contains many provisions to control solid waste. For example, it controls the storage and disposal of solid waste within the District of Sechelt. To ensure that recyclables we are collecting have acceptable levels of contamination, Bylaw 598 contains provisions that requires recyclables be put out for collection and sorted correctly. This bylaw also controls animal attractants in the district, thereby helping to protect bears from accessing garbage. The fines Bylaw 515-8 imposes give teeth to solid waste collection bylaw number 598-2021 so we can keep Sechelt clean and keep our wildlife safe. Most fines in Bylaw 515-8 are the same levels as the old solid waste control bylaw fines where applicable. However, we have increased some fines. The biggest fines are reserved for blatantly attracting wildlife or putting out solid waste such that it attracts wildlife. These fines are on a per incident basis and are in addition to fines that the conservation officer can impose. We kept all the fines at a level that allows them to be assigned under the BENS program as opposed to the court system. Are there any questions?
Council, any questions or comments? Brian, I'm just gonna, okay. Questions or comments? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we could speak to why the delay and why didn't we adopt this when we did the rest of the bylaws?
More or less a matter of staff time and also figuring out, I guess, what the fines we wanted. When we passed the solid waste bylaw, we were under a time frame to start a new service, and staff just didn't have time at that time to do the correct consultations to come up with all these fines.
Perfect. It's good to see it here now then.
There's also some other work happening at the regional district around organics. The regional district will be looking at a complete ban on organics at the landfill. Hasn't been implemented yet, but it's coming. So this will tie into that as well.
Yes, it'll give us teeth, especially on contamination and that will help us with organics. It does also control any property within the district, even if we don't service it. So it ensures that commercial properties and that have solid waste services and also provide recycling.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing no questions or comments, there is a recommendation on page 183 that council proceed with first, second, and third reading of District of Sechelt Bylaw number Notice Enforcement Implementation Amendment Bylaw number 515-8, 2022. Someone like to move first reading? Moved. Seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Move to the actual bylaw. If I go to the right page. Thank you. Item 8.3B, page 187. This is District of Sechelt Bylaw number 515-8, 2022. A bylaw to amend Bylaw Notice Enforcement Implementation Bylaw number 515, 2012. And I'd look for someone to move first reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And this is District of Sechelt Bylaw number 515-8, 2022, a bylaw to amend Bylaw Notice Enforcement Implementation Bylaw number 515, 2012, and someone to move second reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And District of Sechelt Bylaw number 515-8, 2022, a bylaw to amend Bylaw Notice Enforcement Implementation Bylaw number 515, 2012, someone to move third reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 8.4, pages 191 to 199. This is page 191. This is Highways and Parking Amendment Bylaw number 516-3, 2022. And this is a Director of Engineering and Operations and our Engineering Technologist. And I believe Mr. Dillon is probably going to go first.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a brief presentation, so I promise it will be brief. So I'll share my screen right now. Okay, so these bylaw changes that we're presenting tonight are to address driveway culverts and local drainage and ditch maintenance. So I think last year we're all familiar with the aftermath of the atmospheric rivers. Climate change is obviously at the forefront of our minds. Right now, there's a huge heat wave in Europe, and we also endured a similar heat wave last summer. So these changes are really about getting our ducks in a row ahead of the next rainy season, which on a beautiful day like today is probably at the farthest thing in people's minds, but it is coming. So what is the importance of maintaining, like why do we want to maintain these driveway culverts and obstructed ditches? So the importance of maintenance is to address the clogged driveway culverts and the obstructed ditches. And then what can happen is when those are clogged, it does produce erosion on the roads and along the ditches. And then what happens is that extra water that doesn't have a place to go, it goes inside the pores of the road material and all the subgrade soil, which is basically the stuff underneath the road where the road is built. And so that becomes saturated and the bearing capacity of the soil is reduced. And so this causes permanent deformation on the surface, which is the common pothole or the dips in the roads we see, and that could be the direct result of water not moving properly in our ditches. And in sub-zero conditions, which isn't a big issue on the coast, but last winter we did have a pretty significant cold snap. If those roads are saturated, you could get something called frost heave. And we could see a little bit of that breakup. In fact, last winter, we saw more potholes than what we would normally see because of that cold snap we had. So I think a picture says 1,000 words. So this is from last November. And the photo on the left is what happens when driveway culverts are obstructed or not maintained. So that's one of our engineering technologists in the ditch trying to clog it and be a good Samaritan. But what happened here is the water actually went above the driveway, went onto Gale Avenue, and then it entered places that it shouldn't have entered, and those were people's homes. So, this one block culvert resulted in a lot of downstream erosion and water ending up in places we don't want it. And then the photo on the right is just me walking back and forth from work and looking in one of the ditches, and I see a full computer that's being discarded in our ditches. So obviously it's not only bad for the environment, but it'll also affect the flow of water in our ditches. So just two photos to demonstrate the point. So why now is a question. So there are confusions about roles regarding drainage maintenance. What is the district's responsibility and what is the property owner's responsibility? So we want to clarify those. And also, why now? Climate change and the atmospheric rivers we saw last year. So we just want to be ready for that. And the lack of maintenance revealed that we had issues all throughout the system, and we just want to be proactive. So just a demonstration of, what percentage of our work is related to this. So since 2017, the district has had over 4,100 service requests, and 282 of them were attributed to culvert backups and street flooding. So that's about 6%. On the surface, a small amount, but anything we can do to reduce the number of service requests is welcome, given our limited resources. And this might also indirectly cause our pothole service requests. So if anything, this 6% might be an underrepresentation of the true impact of ditch maintenance and culvert maintenance. So the purpose of the proposed changes are to clarify the role of property owners to maintain the driveways and ditches. So ongoing maintenance of private driveways by property owners, ongoing maintenance of driveway culverts, and ditch frontaging properties. Sorry, I got to go back here. And additionally, we want to make sure that ongoing maintenance of boulevards by property owners where concrete curbs and sidewalks are present is done. There's some confusion over the district's role with regards to that. And then, so this bylaw authorization is specifically changes to bylaws to deal with drainage, culverts, and boulevards. It's the highways and parking bylaw and the fees and charges bylaw. So we want to collect a $2,500 deposit for driveway construction to make sure it's done properly. The culverts are sized accordingly. Their inlet and outlet treatments are proper. And if that's done properly, then we'll return the deposit after an inspection occurs. And then also a driveway permit application fee of $300, and that's for the administration to review the designs being put forward by people who want to build these driveways, and then to do the follow-up inspection. And this also creates a mechanism to compel property owners to address obstructed culverts and ditches fronting their properties. And if it's an imminent risk to an adjacent property or municipal infrastructure, this gives us the means to go in there and effect some quick repairs and recover costs for that. So that's the presentation, and open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thank you. It actually touches on the last thing that you mentioned, the cost recovery. So in the bylaw, right at the end, page 199, it mentions that the district may recover costs incurred from the driveway owner in the same manner as municipal taxes. I don't recall this being a particularly common mechanism for collecting fees. Like normally it's through the Ben's bylaw. So what makes this unique, and what other circumstances may we charge somebody and put it onto their property taxes? Thank
you for the question, and through your worship, I think I could give an answer, but the Director of Finance would probably give a better one than me. So I think the idea is we would do the work, and then if whatever the bill for that is in terms of staff time and equipment time, minimum to unobstructed culvert, we would recover that through the tax bill. But if the Director of Finance has something to add to that, I'd be more than welcome. Sorry, I don't.
Okay, so I have a question about that. I think we would bill them to start, I believe. If they pay the bill, it doesn't go on their taxes. I think if they don't pay the bill, it would go on their taxes. Is that correct?
That's how I've done it in previous jurisdictions, yes.
Your Worship?
Yes.
Just to clarify, and I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but only certain types of fines. There's a certain section under the legislation that more has to do with hazards and health things. So I'm not 100% sure if this particular type of a fine would actually be able to be kept. There's an actual section in the charter, and I'm not sure if this would fall under that. Unsightly premises, for example, is one that for sure we can clean. If a person doesn't follow our requirements in our bylaws after several warnings and all the rest, we can eventually clean up the property on their behalf and bill them. But I'm not sure that's the same case with a regulatory bylaw like this.
Okay,
We can follow up.
Yes, there'll be some follow-up that needs to happen on that. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? That's something you're going to have to find it back here. Oh, yes. So I had a point here. You're talking about communications, and you're saying that you'll advertise on local media, social media, be posted to the website. I'm wondering if we could also reach out to community associations. Then they can broadcast that information as well, because this is something they have a vested interest in, to make sure that there isn't flooding, overland flooding, et cetera, in their community. But people need to know that they need to keep their ditches and, culverts and things clear. If they don't, we can come along and find them, but it would be better if they knew ahead of time and could do some of this work before the big rains hit. So I'd like to see community associations be involved, other organizations as well, so we get the information out as broadly as possible.
Thank you for the comment, Your Worship. Last winter, we did put out social media stuff to indicate the importance of this, but we can certainly reach out to community associations and maybe even look at some other means of advertising this as the rainy season comes. We do have variable message boards, so maybe we could deploy those at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Just a comment and then a question. So, people, I would hazard that there's going to be a lot of concern thinking that this is changing something, this is new regulation. And realistically, this is codifying something that's always been the way it should have been done. I know, we've received a couple of emails from people concerned about boulevard maintenance because they're not physically able to and things like that. And I think this is a situation where the community associations might be able to help. Maybe they can do a ditch bash in the fall. They can help coordinate just neighbors working together to make sure that everybody's ditches, culverts, things like that are cleared. I recognize, there's no way the municipality can be responsible for all of this, and I'd be really curious to find out if there are any jurisdictions that do all of the culvert and ditch maintenance. So there's just my comments there. But a question. So a couple of years ago, we had some issues in Sandy Hook with a ditch that had been improperly filled in, extending along multiple properties that was causing flooding across the street. If we have another situation like that, again, multiple properties, would we be trying to determine a single fault for correcting this, or would we just apportion the costs out to everybody and who's affected?
Thank you for the questions, Your Worship. So I think in that case, we would send out our engineering team to look at it, try and determine the root cause of that. And if it was a couple properties, I think our first approach would be just to notify them and have a conversation. I think that's how we've been doing this to date. And I think by and large, most residents do the right thing. They maintain their ditches, they maintain their culverts. It's just providing that mechanism for the few that don't. And so in that case, if it was adjacent homeowners and it was a long driveway like that, then we would look at some kind of apportioning of any costs. But our hope would be that we can just have a conversation with these residents and work with them to see, if they need advice on how to do it. We're more than willing to provide that, but ultimately it is the property owner's responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLean.
All right. I don't want to get into hypotheticals, but I'm going to do it anyways. A typical case I could see is someone looking to fill in a ditch to create street parking. That's off the street. So would this kind of example count as a driveway? How would they do it properly? And how would we act if they did it improperly?
Thank you for the question, through your worship. I believe the engineering technician has a response to that.
Thank you. We do not allow people to fill in their ditches. Some people have, but any structure on a road, even the existing bylaw, they're supposed to get approval. Generally, the biggest issue with filling in ditches is it really cuts down on our drainage capacity, because a ditch can contain a lot more water than a culvert. So we frown on having ditches infilled, which means only a few of them get done. There are certain neighborhoods, you mentioned Tawanak and Sandy Hook are probably the worst ones, where ditches really can't be filled in without causing a lot of issues, because the existing ditches are really deep and they do have a lot of drainage capacity. Neighborhoods such as Selma Park and that, they're more shallow ditches and people have sort of moved into them in some cases. If it is an issue, this bylaw gives us a bit more of a hammer, if you will, but generally if it becomes an issue, we tell landowners, and this is historically, to not fill them in. If they fill them in illegally, then we get them to remove it, or we do it, and we can charge them our costs. In my experience at the district, I do not remember any property owners that refuse to remove materials that they've used to fill in a ditch after being notified by district staff.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So if we turn to page 191, there is a recommendation. What would council like to do? Councillor Toth?
I will move recommendation 2 that council proceed with first, second, and third reading of proposed District of Sechelt Highway and Parking Amendment Bylaw 516-3, 2022.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to the actual bylaw, item 8.4B on page 197. This is District of Sechelt Bylaw number 516-3, 2022, a bylaw to amend highways and parking bylaw number 516, 2012. And I'd look for someone to move first reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And District of Sechelt Bylaw number 516-3, 2022, a bylaw to amend highways and parking bylaw number 516, 2012, and someone to move second reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. District of Sechelt Bylaw number 516-3, 2022, a bylaw to amend highways and parking bylaw number 516, 2012, and someone to move third reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you very much.
Can I just jump in quickly?
Yep, go ahead, Councillor McLean.
I don't want to make a motion, but if staff could just come back with a definitive answer on the charging onto property taxes for fourth reading, that would be great.
Through you, Your Worship, we will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 8.5. So 8.5A is Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 575-7, 2022. And Mr. Dillon, are you speaking to this first? Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship. If the engineering technologist, Paul, would like to speak to this, but this is just the fees and charges related to the previous presentation. They go hand in hand, so we're bringing them forward together.
Thank you.
I'll just say that on this one, I was a bit more organized on the solid waste one, so I got it on the same day. But it just allows us to do charge the deposit and charge $300 for garbage. For driveway permit.
Thank you. So there's a recommendation on page 200. What would you like to do? Councillor McLean?
Yep, I'll move the recommendation that Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 575-7, 2022 be given first, second, and third reading.
Thank you, and it's seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Moving on to the actual bylaw. Right, I have to get to the actual bylaw. 8.5, there we go. That page. Thank you. 8.5B, page 202. This is a District of Sechelt Bylaw number 575-7, 2022, a bylaw to establish a driveway construction financial deposit for the District of Sechelt. And look for someone to move first reading. Moved. Seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And District of Sechelt Bylaw number 575-7, 2022, a bylaw to establish a driveway construction financial deposit for the District of Sechelt. And someone move second reading. Moved. Seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And District of Sechelt Bylaw number 575-7, 2022, a bylaw to establish a driveway construction financial deposit for the District of Sechelt. And someone to move third reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8.6. And 8.6, this is the Council Remuneration Bylaw number 608, 2022. And this has been given first, second, and third reading and is before us for adoption. Council, any questions or comments or direction? Councillor Toth?
I'll move recommendation 2, that council proceed with adoption of Council Remuneration Bylaw number 608, 2022.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded. All right. Any comments or questions comments on this before we go forward? I have to say that I have started talking to people in the community who are considering running, and what I'm seeing is that a lot of younger people are coming forward, and they are aware of this. Let me tell you, they're aware of this, because it will make a difference for them to be able to do this. All right, all those in favor of the recommendation? Thank you. And we'll move to the actual bylaw. This is 8.6B on page 206, and this is before us for adoption. District of Sechelt Bylaw number 608, 2022, a bylaw to establish and designate council remuneration. I'm going to look for someone to move adoption. Moved, seconded, all in favor. Thank you very much. Thank you again to Ms. Roberts and the committee in the community who did all the work behind the scenes on this one. So we'll move on to business items. 10.1, rescheduling of October 5th, 2022 regular council meeting. And this is our corporate officer, Ms. Frank.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just briefly, as I set out here in my report, council scheduled an October 5th regular council meeting at the time that you adopted your meeting schedule for the year. And we will actually be needing this space here for the October 5th for the October 5th advance voting opportunity. So this is in front of council to consider and direct staff on whether you would wish to schedule the council meeting to that week, another day that week, which would be Monday the 3rd or the 4th or the 6th or the 7th, or provide other direction. So it's in front of you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Top?
Thank you. At first I was like, there's a lot of dates to try and choose from. But in thinking about it a little more, I think we're probably best off to go for October 6th, at least from my personal feeling on this. Anybody who shows up on the 5th, not knowing that we've changed the date, will still be able to attend the meeting if it's on the 6th. And I don't want to be there on a Friday. But if we move it to the 3rd or the 4th, anybody who shows up on the 5th will have already missed the meeting. So just my thoughts.
Good point. Councillor McLean?
Councillor Toss' reasoning is so much better than mine. I have a personal preference for the 6th. Works better with my calendar. And I'll let the SCRD reps confirm, but I believe there's no SCRD meeting that Thursday, so it should be able to work for them.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, not that late.
All right. Would someone like to make a recommendation then? Councillor Top?
I guess I will recommend that council or that staff reschedule the regular council meeting date from October 5th to October 6th, 2022 at 7 p.m. in the community meeting room.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded? Right. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 10.2. This is Deputy Corporate Officer appointment, and this was to our corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is basically a housekeeping matter. As council is aware, Carrie-Ann Polson accepted the newly created position of Deputy Corporate Officer earlier this year, and just to ensure that she can carry out all the duties of a corporate officer, many of which are set out in other legislation, we just feel it would be a best practice and a good idea to have council appoint Carrie-Ann Polson formally to that position. So the recommendation there is offered to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Council? Councillor Kuster?
I'll move recommendation 2 that Carrie-Ann Polson be appointed Deputy Corporate Officer for the District of Sechelt.
Is there a seconder? Seconded. All right. Any questions or comments? Yes, you can smile. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Congratulations. Moving on to item 10.3. This is our Development Planning Manager is going to speak to us regarding permission to proceed for rezoning application at 5981 Shoalway, and that's represented by City State. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. I know the applicants have a presentation, so I'll keep my part brief, but basically we have a rezoning application here that involves an OCP amendment as well, looking at changing the land use designation. And as part of that, there's obviously a little bit more extensive process to go through in terms of additional engagement and consultation for an OCP amendment. So that's why there's a number of additional recommendations before you, as you would have seen before in previous applications, looking at notifications, early referrals, a public information meeting for the applicant to host, and also for staff to start negotiating with the applicant around community amenity contributions and affordable housing issues. And basically, yeah, we have a proposal here that also deals with certainly needed housing, and certainly it's the report does go through a number of items in terms of transportation, water, sewer, drainage, things that will need to work further through the review process. This property is part of a larger number of properties within a special infill area that has certainly transportation issues around it in terms of there's no existing local road network within a lot of these properties. So that has some critical linkages there to be looked at and figured out, as well as obviously dealing with the servicing on and around the property. But I will leave it to that for council for any questions, and then turn it over to the applicants for their presentation.
Okay, so you're saying the applicants are going to come and do a presentation for us? Okay. All right. Good evening. Can we have you turn the microphone on, please? Push the button.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. My name is Gaëtan Royer. I'm a partner at City State Consulting, the applicant for this project. I represent the owner of 5981 Shoalway. We assembled a great team, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, and this rendering is very much the look and feel that we wanted for our design. Large open space, a park setting, gentle slopes, meandering pathways, and a feeling of living next to a park is the mood that I was after. The other elements that influenced the project were the housing choices inspired by the district's housing needs study. We're offering a wide range of sizes of units from 630 square feet to 1,453 square feet. We propose 6 fully accessible, below market rental units. And that's even though the report says that we're not providing an amenity contribution. This is what we're offering as an amenity contribution. The owner is willing to enter into a housing agreement, and we're still negotiating with nonprofit agencies to own those wheelchair accessible units and manage them. We are offering 15 units that will have lock-off suites. These typically are used for an older parent to age in place. They're about the size of a hotel room with a kitchenette, around just under 400 square feet. It allows a person to live independently because of the kitchenette and private bathroom, and independent living for a senior with a sense of security that the family lives upstairs is really important. And that's highlighted in the housing needs study as well, these kinds of sizes of units. These units are designed to provide privacy in a separate entrance, so when not used by a relative, they will add to the local rental market at a fairly low rate because they're entry-level, smaller units. Rainwater harvesting is one of our contributions to the environment. It's the property owner who actually asked us to look into that. Like you, like many residents in Sechelt, he's concerned with saving water. Another key design criteria was to create a family-oriented community. Now, what better place to build, to bring 100 families than right next to a nice arena, an elementary school, a major park, and a golf course. I'll say a few words about the site plan. The units are angled, and this is not out of whimsy. It's to follow the site's contour. You see the contour lines traversing on the diagonal on the site plan. The buildings are aligned roughly to these contour lines to minimize excavation, cut and fill, and also to create this gentle slope on the site. The lowest point is where we decided to place a stormwater collection pond at the bottom, and it's top right on your screen. We left a very wide buffer to create a distance from the existing neighbors on St. Andrews. At its narrowest point, that buffer is 34 feet, well in excess of the minimum setback in the bylaw. In our consultation with neighbors on St. Andrews, we heard that their rear yard is often wet. We propose to help these neighbors by capturing surface water along the property line and drain it down to the pond, and then from there it flows to the district stormwater system. Early on, we were working with the neighbor at the bottom of the screen, the other 5-acre property, and he was planning a 6-story apartment building. At one point, we proposed a road connection, and that's in concert with the district staff. We're making sure that the road geometry will work with our road, but we're not building this connection, but we're certainly making sure that it can happen in the future. In all of our designs, we pay particular attention to entry points. This is the access from links that will serve about 40% of the units. The pond is going to be a nice welcoming feature at that entrance. and the other entrance is going to be nicely landscaped off Shoalway. These are artist illustration of the family-friendly, pardon me, family-friendly playground that will be located in our central park. It's a safe place away from cars, and there's that playground is centrally located within the complex. Our proposed amenity contributions include a multi-use pathway. Seashelt is making a lot of progress with implementing active transportation, and I applaud you for the $3.2 million grant that you got recently for the improvement of multi-use pathways. This particular pathway is going to be on private property built by the owner, and it's going to be a direct connection from Links to Shoalway that is going to be an off-road connection. For somebody cycling or walking in the neighborhood, walking next to cars zooming by is not as pleasant as this is going to be. The pathway is going to be wide and have a gentle grade, and we're also going to have meandering trails within the site and shared community gardens for the residents. A landscape architect is going to be retained to flesh out this concept in the next stage, and we're going to be working closely with staff on that. We're looking for someone local, which is hard to find, with experience with xeriscape and native species, drought-tolerant plants. We'd like to work with a local landscape architect. We're finding none, so a local landscape designer would be our preferred way to move forward, somebody who's got experience on the Sunshine Coast. There are many rainwater harvesting precedents. I built one in one of my houses in the past, and they are beautiful. The pond that we proposed is fully engineered, so it's part of the civil engineering drawings that we submitted to staff already, and that is going to be basically catching all the water from perimeter drains and from surface water from the roads, parking areas, etc., and bringing that water to a storm detention pond that's going to minimize the rushing of water down in the district systems. The architectural drawings are in the council package. I'd just like to draw attention to a few features. We exceeded the minimum requirement for parking. Several units are going to have tandem parking, which is perfect for somebody with a boat. In other projects, we provided ceiling hangers for kayaks and canoes as well in parkades. Each parking space is going to be equipped with EV charging, and we're going to provide bike parking, which is located on the side for each unit that don't have a private garage. We consult with wheelchair users, actual users, to review the layout of all of our accessible units. These have, the one that you see highlighted there, have parking at the door and level access from the parking directly to the unit. The site has challenging grades, so we have some stairways in various locations, but there's always a barrier-free access to all the common spaces on site. Finally, we have lock-off suites in the 3 buildings that have parkades. We also have lock-off suites in each of the 12 traditional townhouses. So those traditional townhouses have a garage at grade with the lock-off suite at the back, then main floor and bedroom floor above that for a total of 15 lock-off suites. This slide shows how the stacked townhouses work on the podium. Units D are single-story units, and there's stairways on both sides of these units to get access to Unit E, which are 2 stories high. So the units are mirror image. So each block has 3 units, single story and two-story units above. And in a cross section, this is what it looks like with the units that are Unit C are below they're basically accessed from the parkade directly, which provides for everybody to have a view from a rooftop deck that's provided with these units. So we think that this is a fairly clever way to deal with the steep slope, as well as to provide a really good amenity with these view decks on the top of the units. The style of architecture that we selected is modern farmhouse. We propose white brick on the ground floor, and that's mainly for durability, and the upper floors are going to be white acrylic stucco. We are using black frames around windows and black accents in keeping with the modern farmhouse style. We also propose wood accents for the soffits. The roofs are simple gables, but they're aligned to create a rhythm along the facade. In closing, I'd like to thank staff for their cooperation. Sven has been excellent as our primary file manager. We've had meetings with Ian Hall and Andrew Allen early in the process and as the design progressed. I think Seashelt is a great place to invest, and mainly because staff invest a lot of time and effort in advocating for the community's interest. They're tough up front, and they don't move the goalpost afterwards. And I dealt with your front counter staff earlier today on another project, and everybody has been very professional and very helpful. In closing, what we propose is a housing form that is compact. The 3-story form saves a lot of space compared to ranchers on large lots. Underground parking also saves a lot of space, hides the car away from view. Limiting the site roads and hiding the cars leaves a lot of open space, and I think our design takes really good advantage of that generous open space with the playground and park setting. Shares amenities like that playground and community gardens, walking trails will become social space within that neighborhood. Sharing gardening tips is going to help people to get to know each other. It's going to create a real sense of community, and that's what our motto is, City-State's motto is building better communities. More importantly, this project provides housing for young families can afford, and we offer fresh and neutral architecture in a site plan that creates a very serene neighborhood. And in that spirit of serenity, I kindly ask that you give us your support. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I think we'll stop sharing the screen first. Thank you. Council, any questions or comments? I have a couple I'll start with before the council jumps in then. You're talking, how many units here? We've got, just saw it here, 102 townhouse units, correct? So have you considered daycare?
We've considered daycare in another project, but not on this particular site. It has been discussed with the owner. In another project, we've allocated space. We pre-designed a unit to be able to pass the standard for an 8 children daycare. The licensing requirement for an owner-occupier operating a daycare are very low for up to 8 children, and I think that might be something we consider. A larger daycare typically requires about 3,500 square feet to pass all the licensing requirements, because you need so many specialized rooms and amenities, a first aid room and the kitchen and so on. So I think a residential daycare might be something we can influence the owner to provide.
Maybe that's something that staff could talk to you about in conjunction with the district one, right? Because we are looking at potentially building across the street. But this would put pressure on that facility, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would also create the requirement for some kind of circular driveway for drop-off, so it would present some design challenges. Given the grades, the access as we're bringing people down from Shoalway to the first parkade with using a 12.5% slopes, which is quite steep. So I think mixing children as part of that in that location for a drop-off would be difficult, but we'll discuss it.
Okay, before I go to staff or to council, one other question, and this actually a comment probably, I guess. Inside of the process, would the school district be involved in, being informed? Because this could have a potential impact on Kinnickinnick Elementary School. Currently, the school district they have additional classrooms at Kinnickinnick, but they are using them for staff positions now. And we do see more children coming to that area, which means that they would have to relocate those staff. So the classrooms are there, but they still need more space.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so just Mr. Hall?
Yeah, that is one of the referral agencies.
Okay, so you've indicated that's one of the referral agencies that's been listed in the application. Okay. All right, council, any questions or comments? Councillor McLean?
I'll kick it off with a comment. Outstanding. This is exactly what we need in the West Porpoise Bay community. This is, I would say, a model development. It works with some very challenging topography, but it increases density in a place where we do have sewer and we do have transit. Those are my two big criteria, and it is very walkable to get to the elementary school there. So it's the perfect location for something like this. So I want to commend the applicant in putting together this ambitious proposal in this location. I think it's right, and I look forward to seeing what the community has to say. In terms of a question, I just do have a question on public access and strata versus public. So in particular, that little stub road coming off Shaw and the continuation of Link Street, would those be public streets or would they be strata roads? And likewise with the trail and the playground, would that be something like an easement or something like that, or would it be a full-on public park?
Through the mayor, I would like to perhaps, I don't want to improvise here, but what has been talked about at this point in time is that Links would be a road dedication, and it would be a road improved to district standards. The access from Shoal would be a strata road. It would be a strata access at this point in time. Should the neighbor develop and should this take place while we're doing the design, I think it would be relatively easy to accommodate through traffic for the neighbor, but in that case, it would require, this can't be achieved using an access easement, reciprocal access easement. It would have to be a road dedication. So our difficulty is that the owner next door has suspended all planning. So we have to create this as an independent project, and we're proposing a strata driveway off Shoal. Was there another question that I missed?
Yeah, just the trail and the park, the public playground or the playground on the other side. Would that be a park dedication or would it be strata property as well?
The multi-use pathway that we propose is a public amenity, and we would provide an access easement. So that would be done through either a statutory right-of-way or an access easement in favor of the district, which makes it public access. We think that it's a generous contribution from the owner to build a multi-use pathway to your standard, which is 3 meters with no steps, and I think that would be a way to bring the to provide this amenity. With regards to the playground and the community garden, those would be strata entities that have maintenance requirements that typically would be very difficult for strata to take over if it becomes a public amenity. So we're not proposing that as public at this point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Awesome jobs at a starting point. I'm excited to see this proceed and see where it goes. I just want to double check beyond the 6 accessible units that you spoke around a housing agreement with, perhaps for somebody to operate, the entire rest of the development would be market rentals?
The rest of the development would be market strata, so market ownership.
Ownership, okay.
The 6 accessible units would be managed by a nonprofit, and we can't announce, we don't have a solid enough agreement in place for that. Those would be affordable, accessible rental.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Councillor Toth?
Thank you. I just want to chime in that I think it's a great looking project. I like what you're doing with the stormwater pond. We know that it's easy to put stuff into culverts and hide it away and bury it. But that's not where we need to be moving as we go forward. So I appreciate that, you know, maintaining the daylight aspect of the water feature and going from there. I know this will still have to go to APC and we'll get their comments and what have you. Personally, I'm not sure that white is the right finish in this environment. I think it's going to be a maintenance issue for the strata, but that'll be for the owner to decide and APC to comment on as it proceeds through its path. So thank you for presenting tonight.
Thank you. First of all, staff, could you make me a co-host so I can take hands down, et cetera, when we need? Any other questions or comments from staff or from council? Councillor Rowe, did you have another comment? Thank you. Councillor Kuster?
I just wanted to say thank you very much. This has been really well thought out and offering a lot considering other projects we've seen come forward. So I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to comments from everyone else. And yeah, thank you so much.
I'll have to tell you that we've already been receiving emails in support of this. So the community is watching, and so far, the ones who've reached out are saying, yes, we want this, it's well thought out. They want to see it move forward. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I did have one question about the phasing here because it's showing 3 phases. Are those intended to be built like fully consecutively? So, you know, the neighborhood's going to be experiencing construction for, I don't know, 7-ish years. Or are you planning to sort of start with one and then get going on the next before the first one's done type thing? Just some clarity. Thanks.
Through the chair, the idea of phasing is in anticipation that perhaps market absorption might become difficult. We don't think it will be. We think that the market is ready to absorb those units. The experience from other developments, the experience from Gibson's where absorption is immediate, we may not require phases, but I think it makes sense to be clear upfront as to what the phases are going to be. That's why we illustrated that.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, there are some recommendations on page 212. Did you have a question? No? Okay. Recommendation on page 212. What would you like to do? Councillor McLean?
I'm not going to read them out, but I will move recommendations 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded. Number of seconders. All right. All those in favor? Thank you, and we look forward to seeing this come back before us. Mr. Hall. You're here for our next item? Okay, we have to, oh, he's gone. We had to move out Councillor McLean again, but staff are on top of it for me. Perfect. So we're going to move on to item number 10.4. This is a development permit for 5610 Trail Avenue High Point Apartments. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This report was prepared by Sven. He's away on holidays, so he's not here to present, and I won't try to top one of his presentations. I will keep it brief, but I would like to say that I have been working and in communication with the developers here on and off since I first started the district, and I know they've been working on finishing this development over 10 years. So I'm pleased to see that it comes before council as a development permit and that they're actively still moving forward to fill in an area in the downtown with more needed residential units. So we have a development permit here for a 3-story apartment building. It's ready for council to consider approval. It's been through the referral process. APC has provided comments. The only outstanding item is comments from Fortis. And the applicants were aware of the issue of, if Fortis comes back and there's comments that require any changes, we may have to make some changes to the DP depending on the scale of those comments, but it's certainly ready otherwise for council to consider giving approval, subject, and issuance would be subject to receiving any comments from Fortis and dealing with any implications there.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments? Councillor Toth?
Just a couple, and my apologies if they're in here and I've missed them. Is this intended to be strata ownership, or is it intended to be rental? And then the follow-up question to that, is this intended to be age restricted in any way? Do we know?
It's my understanding from the applicants that it is intended to be age restricted. I think 55 and up is the restriction that they're going to be installing. And my understanding it is a strata ownership building.
Thank you. I'm just going to make some notes here. Strata and age restricted. Okay, I don't see any other hands up at this point. I know this project has come back forth. It's been in conversation for quite a while. It looks like they have come to some agreement with the current strata so that they can actually access it through the existing strata and not have to go as one of the proposals that came forward, coming through the BC Hydro right away. So does this retain our pump track? Because that was one of the issues of one of the proposals that came before.
Yes, it does allow for the pump track to remain as is. The access issue has been one of the long-standing barriers to this development moving forward, and that's been resolved through the negotiations between the existing strata and the developers.
Thank you. All right, council, any questions or comments? There's a recommendation on page 254, and then we could potentially amend that to indicate in something like incorporating response or referral comments from Fortis. Would that be appropriate in there? Okay. Okay, I'll make that recommendation. I think everybody's winding down here a bit. The council approved development permit 2021-39 High Point Apartments, subject to the incorporation of comments from Fortis on the development. Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded? Any other comments or questions? All those in favor? Thank you very much. And we can bring Councillor McLean back. I've got him. I've got it already. He's joining back in. Thank you. Are you finished with us tonight? Thank you for all of that tonight. You had a lot on the agenda. And as soon as we get Councillor McLean back, we will go on. There he is. Thank you. Moving on to item 10.5. This is the capital project updates. Report from Mr. Dillon, Director of Engineering and Operations. This is our capital project updates for our regular council meeting. Any questions or comments, council? Mr. Toss?
Just a couple of hopefully easy ones. The Operations Center, I drove past there this afternoon and I'm thrilled to see some work going on there with the forming. So that's great news to see that moving forward. It's not a question, just a comment. With the chemical storage building, we've got a contract award out, or it's been awarded. Scheduling, are we talking, I know, contract needs to be signed, things like that. Are we hoping for like a 2-month turnaround or a 6-month turnaround?
Thank you for the question, through your worship. I'm going to go with the 6-month turnaround on that, just given the lead time. These are modular prefabricated units, and they'll be coming in on skids. And so once they arrive, they should be pretty quickly installed. But everything's a little bit slower these days in all trades and all materials. So 6 months probably more appropriate.
And just a follow-up on that. I remember we had talked about an initial or original contract amount for this. Do we know where this came in based on the budget?
Thank you for the question again, through your worship. So I don't have the exact number. It is under 300,000, I believe, which is within the budget for this. Going out again with a different approach seemed to work with the modular prefabricated units. So we were quite pleased with the prices we got. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I noticed on page 295 with regards to the Sun Coaster Trail, we are awaiting response back from the Shoalway Nation. I understand there was a on-site meeting with some of their staff end of March-ish, some time frame. Was it March or April? I forget, March or April. And so we got some verbal information, but we have not yet gotten written. And I think we are awaiting and we're reaching out. And if we don't, we will probably go ahead without their comments to get this moving forward. So I know that I have conversations with the chief, and I will bring this up with him and make sure he's aware of this. It's a follow-up to a conversation we had last week. So thank you for that one. Any other questions or comments on any of the others? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thank you. There's a comment here about the Brookman to Selma Park Trail. Is it under consideration to improve the steep section? And particularly some safety improvements at the top where Kyle Kwasnicia fell up many years ago.
Thank you for the question. Through your worship, I think we've looked at all that, the whole trail, and done a walk through, and the intent is to address that particular issue. There are some site challenges, steep grades, and constructability issues. I think if I was best to categorize where we're at now, I would say we're in the conceptual stage, and we'll be looking at various options moving forward. But yes, we are looking at that particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor McLean.
Thank you. I was just wondering if I could get a reminder about the history on the Wakefield lift station. So it looks like we're going out to a design build RFP. Previously, it went out to an RFP. What was the reason that we didn't sign a contract there?
Yeah, so the previous approach we took was what would be called a design bid build process, where you put out a request for proposal to consultants and they would design it, and we would have a complete design going forward for a contractor to bid on that. So that RFP came back with the design costs being quite high. So if we were to extrapolate based on engineering being roughly about 10% of a project, it looked like the Wakefield lift station was going to come in higher than budget. So then we looked at it again, looked at our requirements. We scaled back some of the items, such as a fully enclosed lift station. So now we're going with a kiosk type lift station, and also trying to use the design build process. So there's some efficiencies there. So the design builder actually has the like a in-house design person in there. So oftentimes the experience is when you have a separate consultant designing, they tend to be conservative and they don't factor in constructability. But when you have the designer as part of the team that's actually building the project, they look at those things like constructability, lead times, and getting materials. So that process can come up with savings. And we've seen a recent demonstration of that with the chemical storage building, which we went out for that design build process and came back with a lower cost project. So that was the journey that took us to this point. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for that history and the reminder.
Thank you. Council, any further questions on this report? All right. Thank you for the update. We really appreciate it. Moving on to item 10.6. This is proposed 2023 budget process, and this is from our Director of Financial Services, Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the purpose of this report is to have Council endorse the 2023 budget process, and staff acknowledge that the process will run basically through two councils, the current council and the new council. But we do want to get started earlier, like we did last year, and we were through the majority of the budget process by the end of the year. And so we do have some dates attached to Schedule 1 of the report. And of course, we know that these dates are subject to change possibly by the new council. But we want to get going, and we want to start it off with a website survey as we did last year. And so our intention is to have that up on Friday onto the website. And we will be providing some information to the current council along the way, as well as to the new council as we bring them into to council. But the key is on the November 23rd meeting. This would be after the new council's in. That's when the budget book would be presented to the new council. And then we would be planning another couple-day session, similar to what we had last year, around November 30th to December 1st, to go through that budget binder. We also know we need to squeeze in some form of strategic planning in here as well. That's not normally part of the budget process, but it'll be part of the orientation with the new council. So thank you.
Thank you. Any comments on the proposed budget process timeline? Councillor McLean?
Yeah, I appreciate that the director just mentioned the strategic plan. Would you imagine that this budget essentially follows the strategic plan that we have currently, given that the new council likely won't have a strategic plan before adoption? So they may be able to amend it, but they won't have that overall guiding sense in the early stage that will be based off the current plan. That general, yeah.
Yes, thank you for the question. Through your worship, yes, it would. I mean, the idea here is we would be keeping a similar level of service in the base budget for the new council, but we would be we're still working on many of the priorities that were set with the previous council, so it would be continued at this point.
It's good to hear we're referred to the previous council already.
Sorry.
Councillor Toth.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. I've been thinking a little bit about this myself, and it's like, this is really interesting that, we're setting schedule and we're setting direction for the next council. Yeah, we are the previous council now for the next couple months. So no, I latched onto that comment. So thank you, Councillor McLean, for that.
One of the items that I've been talking with staff about is, I know when this council got elected, we have council meetings Wednesday night, Wednesday afternoon, whatever, we have those. But there was no information about other dates that we had to have you be available, right? We all had to be available for, so in putting these forward, what we're actually looking at doing is in the package, when people pick up their package for, their nomination package, there will actually be a tentative date sheet in there indicating when some of these dates are, so that, that's a consideration. If they're working and they need to have time off, it's nice to have those dates up front, and they can go to their bosses or whatever and talk about that, have that conversation. So there's not, a surprise when they get elected and all of a sudden, okay, now you're going to be coming to, take 2 days off, November 30th and December 1st, and come to this meeting. So having these dates ahead of time, I think, will be beneficial for more of a smooth transition. So there's a recommendation on page 297. Did you want to say something else? Oh, there was a bug flying around. Okay. Page 297 is a recommendation. Councillor Toth.
I'll move recommendation 2, that council approve the 2023 budget process as presented.
And is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Moving on, council reports. We're just about through this. Council reports. Council, we'll start with Councillor Lamb, Councillor Kuster, and then we'll do Toth, Rowe, and McLean. Councillor Lamb.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Councillor Kuster.
I have nothing to report either.
Councillor Toth.
I originally didn't have something to report, but I thought I might as well mention. I have been talking to a couple of people who have shown interest in putting their name forward for council this fall. Happy to talk to anybody who's curious, and it doesn't matter whether you agree with me or hate me or what. I think it's important that anybody looking to put their name forward knows what they're getting into. So other than that, I don't have anything council business related to report.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
It's a challenge trying to do this on your phone. Well, in an effort to not be known as a has-been, I am announcing tonight that I am going to seek re-election. And I don't have much more to say on the topic than that. It's been an absolute pleasure, spending these past 4 years with all of my council family and getting to know staff. And I think we built a really strong foundation. I think we've changed some culture. And I want to keep building on that. And things are starting to just move in the right direction, I think. Yeah, we've got tons of challenges and still lots of work to do. But I just wanted to let everyone know that. I've talked to a couple of you, but not all. And I haven't said anything to staff. So Joanne Frank, I'll be making a date to come see you. That's it. That's it for me.
Thank you. And welcome to the race. Councillor McLean.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. All right, I've got just a few things. Councillor Toth and I actually attended the funeral for Annie Kuliak. The RCMP were the pallbearers And it was actually was Clarence Lee, former Reverend Clarence Lee, but he was one of the officiants at the service, and he talked about the fact that when Annie lived up north in the igloo, the RCMP actually came and shot all of her dad's dogs because they were trying to get them to move away. And how over the years, Annie, did not have a relationship with the RCMP and then transformed that relationship. And one of her felt pictures or whatever is now in the headquarters of the RCMP in Ottawa. And the RCMP they've offered to be the pallbearers. So transform that relationship. And what Clarence Lee said was, this is reconciliation in action. So that was pretty cool. I had a breakfast meeting with Chief Paul. We reach out to each other occasionally, at least once a month, and get together and share questions and comments and issues. It was very informative, and I've informed Council a little bit about what the conversation was. I was invited to attend the East Porpoise Bay Community Association picnic, and I got there and set down my chair and then was talking with them about municipal stuff and had to leave. It was my husband's birthday, and I was taking him out for supper, but left my chair there, so I had somebody else pick it up for me. It was a couple of them they were hoping that it wouldn't be that way, but that's just the way it is, so that's okay. I was on a call yesterday, a Zoom meeting with Minister Bill Blair from the federal government, federal minister, and our provincial minister, Norm Cullen, and they were talking about emergency funding. So one of the programs that is set up by the federal government for disaster financial assistance actually has a 15% contingency built in, that if you want to build something better than what's being replaced, you can up to 15%. Don't know if that's sufficient, particularly with smaller communities. So we did bring that piece up. So we don't want to do like for like when we have to repair things. We want to be able to improve them. What was the other one I mentioned? I forget what the other one I was talking about with them. We talked about reconciliation and the fact that we want to have both municipalities and nations together in the conversations, both at the federal and the provincial level. And they agreed. Now we'll see if there's any movement on that one. There was one more thing, but I don't remember what it was right now. And then this afternoon, I was, just actually before this, I was at a grant announcement for the Sunshine Coast Regional District down in Elphinstone. Wood Creek Park got a grant for their septic system, their wastewater system down there. So good to see that happen. It's a system that needs some major repairs. That's all I have. So, Councillor Toth, SCRD.
I did not attend SCRD meetings last week. I had COVID, picked it up while I was out of town and ended up isolated out of town and a couple nights in my tent trailer when I got home. So I'm not in a position to give an SCRD update. I can go back and review the meetings and I'll include it in my next report that I submit, which I guess you won't see until September. So.
Thank you. And Councillor Toth actually asked me if I could do that, and just with the way the day went today, I just didn't have time to pull that together either. Anything further? Seeing none, we have no council correspondence. Are there any emergency items?
No, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All in favor?